right, so I would like to call this meeting to order. We are already recording. This is a meeting of the EDIC of Gloucester. We're meeting in the Harbor Masters Conference Room as well as a hybrid meeting. So some members are remote. As a hybrid meeting, persons who wish to, from the residents or citizens listening in or watching are invited to raise their hand on the remote, and we'll track that and make sure that you have an opportunity to ask a question or make an observation. So with that, if we can run around the remote room of sorts and take attendance. Tom Valve here. Who else? Taylor here. Gretel
here.
Patty
here.
Rob
here.
Okay, and Adria is participating as well. Hey, Adria. Sal is on medical leave, I believe, and will not be participating. So first thing in order, as always, is to look at the previous meeting minutes, which was September 2023. And if hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look, hopefully we acknowledged everybody who was here, and any comments or edits to those meetings? Meeting minutes? Patty or Rob?
None from me.
None for me.
Okay. With that, let's run around the room and approval. Taylor? Aye. Gretel?
Aye.
Patty?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And Tom? Aye. All right, with that, really today's meeting is in large part around some conversations, and I've put together slides. I apologize, they're a little text heavy, but you know, we have two reports that are, I think, important and strategic in terms of economic development in the city. The energy report and the Cumberland Road feasibility study. And what we want to do is make sure that we are not one of those organizations that does a study or a report and then it goes on a shelf and then sort of disappears. So you know, it's not exactly clear what the path forward is, but I think we want to be rigorous in our analysis and identify and talk as a board on what next steps should be taken, and where we feel we can positively influence economic development or make recommendations on economic development. So towards that end, I put together some slides, really just to run through quickly. It's really to remind everybody of some fundamental facts on each of those reports so that we can tee up the conversation about next steps and make sure everybody has an opportunity to provide input. So Lee, can you?
I can't put anything on the screen.
Oh, you can't put anything on the screen?
No,
Okay.
that's why I asked if you wanted me to print this out, pass it out.
Okay. So apparently we'll have to go old school. So hopefully everybody received a copy. And you can, there's printouts here, but hopefully you'll be able to take a look at the presentations.
It was sent to the board.
Yeah. So anyways, stop me or interrupt if you wish. So the first couple slides are, I happened to just drive up to Blackburn and wanted to sort of take a look because I hadn't been there for a while. So it's just to, I don't know if other members have been up there, but it's to identify that there are 2 properties, with leasing development signs up there. So one is 15 Great Republic Drive, which is the former Ryan and Woods distillery business. I think that's been on the market for a while. Looking at the assessment online, it looks like it's about 12,000 square feet. And that is for lease. The other property, and I didn't reach out to the owners, but has generally been, the site has been prepared. It's flat and ready for development. For almost 11 acres, and it looks like that now it is for sale or lease for some incoming development.
Supposed to be cultivation.
Right, it was supposed to be cannabis cultivation, and I'm not exactly sure what has happened, but I'm assuming that that didn't work out. It's an assumption on my part, not a fact.
I'll reach out to Jeff.
Yeah.
And Tom, dumb question. Who owns the property?
Jeff Amaro and
Is it Joe Gigoloni? What's
one of the Gigolonis, Jeff, yeah.
So there was going to be they had an arrangement with a cannabis growing facility, not Happy Valley, but another facility. And based on the fact that there's a for sale or lease sign up there, I assume that didn't work out. And so they're looking for other options. Patty, do you have, I know you're more residential than commercial, but do you have any insight into either of these properties?
I do not.
So we'll look into it, but again, 2 properties that are available for the 15 Republic, the Ryan and Wood, is more of an office property than
Kind of manufacturing down below, technically manufacturing.
Right,
Below.
I mean,
It's a
obviously-
2-story. I don't know, is it the whole building? I've been in there once. I think it might be that whole building.
I think it's the whole building, and obviously there are small batch manufacturing
Yeah.
groups, from Rockport Brewing to
Yeah.
Kimchi that is
Right.
probably large enough for that sort of a space.
What happened to the tenant?
Ryan Wood went out of business.
Oh, they went out
They
of
were
business. Oh, okay.
distillers.
Okay.
So it's
How
too
long-
bad that Sal isn't here.
Yeah,
I would
how
assume
long
that
has he
Sal
been-
might know.
Right, how long has he been not?
I have no idea. So, but we'll try to find out. Excuse
Tom,
me.
another question. It's in the city's interest for that, for the property to be sold and developed. Does or can the city play any role in helping to market the property?
That's kind of Sal's role, and he would do it through that, like, what is it? Link or.
Yeah, there's a
some-
website that, is, the city participates in to list available properties.
Yeah, commercial spaces, primarily commercial spaces and developable spaces. I mean, technically Jeff's now is shovel ready, it's under construction, so, and permitted, so that's a good one. And that would be a good one for, like, if they're really struggling or they don't have an idea, we could go to Mass Econ with that, because that's definitely ready to go.
Right.
And now would be the time to change the footprint. Because I was up there maybe within the past 4 weeks, and there's not foundations in the ground yet, so
Correct.
now is the absolute best time to change the footprint on that project.
And,
if it needs to be changed.
Between, for me, a busy day yesterday and the holiday yesterday, I didn't get a chance to reach out to Jeff or Joe and ask exactly what is or isn't going
Yeah,
on.
I'll just reach out to Jeff and see
Yeah.
if his name came up, and I just want to see if they need to move in a different direction, or if they're 100%, because the last time I talked to him, he was like, do you want to look at our prospectus? Some new interesting investing
Right.
house.
And I have had
Saturated market.
years ago, and when GMGI hosted a meeting to promote sort of life sciences and specifically sort of life science manufacturing, batch manufacturing. I don't think Jeff was there, he might have been, but I know Joe was there. So they're both aware, certainly, and they're smart developers of the life science potential, in the North Shore and in Massachusetts, so.
Right.
The other thing that I wanted to share with the group is the work of Taylor. But the signage up there, I think, looks great. I hope there's been nothing but positive reviews. It's pretty much full at the beginning. There is some open space in the second one along Great Republic Drive.
Cometeer is gonna come on board next, like Q1.
Yeah.
He said his facilities budget was, and I knew that, Beauport Financial jumped on. There's people I knew once the signs went up, like, yeah, they'll come back. I kind of hounded them and they didn't want to do it, and the second they went up, they're like, hey, we want to be on that sign. Okay. So, that would be it, and then there would be, Noah's on there, so whatever happens with Jeff and Merrill's property. And then like custom seasonings just didn't want to, I don't know if they just don't, I don't think they need that. I don't think anyone goes to see them necessarily, so.
But it looks great.
Yeah.
The only thing that I observed in driving up there, and I'd encourage everybody to do it, is you could probably use, and I should know, but I truthfully don't, whose responsibility it is, but it could benefit from sort of a brush cutting, right, along the sides of the roads and just sumac and,
Oh, the whole parking zone, that'd be the DPW, really.
yeah, so we can, for the next meeting, reach out to the DPW and find out, how to get that in the queue or whose responsibility, authority it is. I mean, my memory is that each tenant is responsible for sort of updating landscape, but it certainly makes sense to approach it as a, sort of a master, for the whole park rather than parcel by parcel.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So the next one is Weston Sampson, as many of you sat through, was prepared their report that they walked through last time. And before we talk about sort of next steps, I just thought it would be of value to sort of refresh everybody's memory. I'll try to go through this, very quickly, since most of you have either read the report or at a minimum listened to the PowerPoint presentation that they gave last time. So indulge me, I guess. So first, in terms of approach, the last time that this feasibility was done was 2010. They looked at, I think they came up with 36 parcels that could potentially be developed. This time they took more of a master planning approach and looking at the whole site and what made sense. And the goal was to maximize development potential, not just sort of carve it up into, a million small lots. Key feasibility facts. They recommended sort of a master plan for stormwater with 4 locations for detention basins. This was conceivably the EDIC or the city taking the lead on this, rather than whoever would develop the parcels would have to take on stormwater. A 300,000 gallon above ground tank. They also looked at a underwater system, but I think given the ledge, their recommendation was the above ground tank at the highest location in the area. Wastewater was a high pressure line serving only the industrial waste on Condolin Road that would then go out to Magnolia Ave and to the wastewater treatment facility there. So about 1.5 miles, almost 2 miles down the road. As we talked about, this would not be able to serve residential customers unless the city wanted to, while the roads were torn up to install this system. Conceivably, they could at the same time, for a separate expense, put in a residential sewer line. Roadway on the site would be for entering and exiting the site, and roughly less than 1 mile of road, but it is, a steep site, so not simple. Electrical, they made some recommendations on kilowatt hours that could be used for 400,000 square foot development, but didn't say, that's what you're going to need 1 megawatt of capacity or 3 megawatts of capacity, which is a sort of a more complicated than just taking square footage and punching in who might be there. You really need to understand the load demand. I included the next slide was, it sort of surprised me that, and I think we should, as a next step, figure this one out, is that for the parcels that were part of the study site, there's some, we know the city owns a couple, we own one, Ed Ackerley owns one or more, but that there were some unknowns. We didn't really talk about, but we should figure that out and make sure. I don't think this is a heavy lift, but we should
But
answer.
they come up as 9 Dale Ave, so the assumption would be the city of Gloucester.
I think so, yeah.
So I don't know why, but some of them come up, that's why I'm just looking them up right now.
Yeah.
So that I'm on 198-3, it's still 9 Dale Ave. But you're right, some of them are listed as city of Gloucester.
Yeah, but as part of the, and they still need to finalize the report, we should finalize this information for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. So they all come up as 9 Dale Ave. So when I initially did that, our first presentation, I just made the assumption that it was city of Gloucester.
The next is a map that just, I'm not sure it's worth spending time with. You really need to sort of enlarge it and play around with it, but just to give everybody a sense of what we're talking about. And I think, again, one of the key things from this master planning approach that this differed from the previous, is that much of if this in total, the whole study area might be as much as 60 acres, we're talking about probably using less than 10, right? Is that the site is so troublesome, is that for the roadways, the 400,000 square foot of development, some stormwater retention basins, the water tower, much of this land, while very difficult to obviously utilize, is not going to be used under this feasibility. The next slide is a reminder of the costs. Roadway construction, 4 million, wastewater infrastructure, 7.3 million, water infrastructure, 9 million, nothing on the electrical, and the total estimated cost was 20 million roughly, which does not include any acquisition costs for the privately owned land. And again, a conversation that the EDIC and really the city needs to have, is about, how to go forward with this study, whether there's an appetite for development, and of that, what portion might we be interested in, spending as a city to develop the area, so that it was essentially sites wouldn't necessarily be cleared, but so it's ready for somebody and attractive to somebody, as opposed to an individual company or organization having to take on some portion of these costs. They identified other opportunities, solar at the site. If the city EDIC were to take on stormwater management, that's something that we could then charge tenants for ongoing maintenance, the development and ongoing maintenance, and would provide the EDIC with a cash flow, which we currently don't have. And then finally, sort of some hybrid development is, could we, right now, again, an impediment is that it's zoned residential. Could we carve out land for the industrial development per what Weston and Sampson has recommended, and then either sell off the other or work to provide residential development in the other portion of the area. They also did the market conditions and pro forma, which we talked about at length. I think they did a pretty good market conditions analysis that suggested, that the economy in Massachusetts is strong, and there's a number of high tech and life science, opportunities, but nonetheless, Gloucester is, sort of end of the road, and can't be looked at in the same way that Waltham, Woburn, Watertown can be. And so, sort of, if you build it, they will come is is a risky proposition, even if the economy of Massachusetts is doing well. And then they conducted a pro forma analysis, which we thought was good and rigorous, and showed that it's potentially financially viable for 400,000 square foot development, but on the other hand, it's totally contingent on a number of assumptions, which they did their best job to sort of, be in the middle of aggressive to overly conservative, but there's nothing that we would hang our hat on in terms of this until we really got a better handle. So again, thanks for indulging me sort of hitting some of the highlights. And I might have missed some, and if I did, I apologize, but I wanted to get sort of everybody's reactions, and in the next couple of slides, there's sort of their recommendations on next steps, and Taylor and I had met and talked about next steps in terms of reviewing the feasibility assessment with the city, DPW, Community Development Office, Mayor, certainly discussion with Ed Akerley, the landowner, and there may be others, but I think it's just Ed. And then certainly we want to share the findings with Senator Tarr and Representative Ferrante, since they were instrumental in getting us the funding to make this feasibility assessment happen. But with that, I just want to sort of open it up for either outstanding questions that should get back to Weston Sampson as they finalize the report, or thoughts on sort of next steps. We certainly know that this is not low-hanging fruit. This is a hard project and a big project. I think the reason, though, that it should be analyzed fully is there's no other opportunity in Gloucester right now that provides for something that could be 200 to 400 jobs, or bringing in some strong manufacturing or industrial activity to Gloucester. So I'll leave it at that.
And Tom, it's Rob. We've talked about this before, that beyond the jobs and economic impact is the opportunity for Gloucester to actually play the city to play an ongoing economic role beyond just jobs and tax revenue, but actually continue to have some role in the property that could generate, where EDIC is generating revenue on a going forward basis, as opposed to just a transactional basis.
Oh.
I don't know how that conversation gets started with the city, or if they can facilitate, if the consultant can facilitate that kind of process, that kind of discussion.
Patty, what's I'm just going to call on folks. Patty, I know obviously you have, I think we all do, but great concerns about the whole wastewater aspect of this, and digging up streets and the inconvenience that will not serve the residents of Magnolia along that line. But your other that and or other thoughts that you have?
Yeah, the infrastructure part is a big concern to me. And one of the reasons is you increase the value of all the land on Magnolia Avenue with that infrastructure. And if you were to bypass it, I think you're missing a nice opportunity for the city.
Yeah, so I think one question we could ask, and it shouldn't be difficult, is if we ran an additional, if they're digging up the street, can they put in a second sewer line? And what's that cost?
I think it was mentioned I think one of the presenters mentioned that the elevation changes would prevent a gravity sewer, and
Yep.
so it wouldn't be a simple sewer project. It would be similar to what we have in North Gloucester, which it would be pump stations, lift pumps at every residence, and
It would be a combination, I think, where depending on where they fell, and then, yeah, along the line, there would have to be booster pumps, so, okay. But it's a question we can at least ask them.
Adria, what do you see as, from your sort of legal perspective? You know, of course, assuming we're gonna sit down with the city and really most of it is gonna be about cost and, you know, the challenges and stuff, but legally, looking through your eyes, what questions arise?
So to be 100% honest with you guys, I am not as caught up as you all are on this project. I missed the last board meeting. I've skimmed through their report, but I have not gone through it with a fine tooth comb. Looking at your report, Tom, I think, I mean, I don't have any specific concerns off the top of my head other than what's already been mentioned. Sewer, I think, is a big one. I think finding out not an alternative, but what the cost would be as Taylor suggested to add a second line in there, what that would be. But I have to really look at that report more before I can give you a better answer, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Tom, on the legal front, originally had Manchester expressed some watershed concerns or something?
That was the other parcel.
That was
Yeah,
it,
there was
okay.
a parcel sort of between Concord Ave and School Street
Yeah,
that was also identified, and they were concerned because their watershed is impacted by that land, but also the city of Gloucester. Michael wasn't particularly engaged in wanting to develop that.
yeah, it's a much larger, harder parcel to develop with a lot more variables. And,
Okay.
yeah, it was just something Weston Sampson looked at, but you know, I think probably 150 lots and 75 of them have unknown ownership, like just awful, a terrible situation. So,
On a related note, who would oppose this?
well, that's like, so just in the same sense, back to Adria, to change zoning, and actually Patty, you too, like if the city owns those parcels and Ed Akeley owns a parcel and they're all zoned residential, how hard is that to get the zoning changed if the ownership and say the city was on board? Like, do people contest it, or is it just kind of I mean, it's obviously not gonna be, you know, just go change the zoning, but like, is it a bunch of meetings? Do residents get to contest it? Like, what's the process?
For zoning changes. Adria, I don't know if I have this correct, but it would be planning board and zoning board. And I've noticed a lot of resistance. And then I think ultimately it would be city council vote. But I have noticed a lot of resistance to consumer needs more in the city rather than big picture needs. That's the most vocal element that you usually will run into. And that can be a big challenge because it's very vocal.
Yeah, I would agree with Patty. The public definitely has the opportunity to oppose any project. You know, only the abutters get the notification, but that being said, with a project of this scale, if we were to move forward with it, more than just the abutters would likely end up being involved. You know, I don't know. And you never really know how that's gonna go. You know, anytime we go before the zoning board or the planning board for a big project, you know, it's always wise that the applicants, the petitioners kind of reach out to the public and try to have meetings beforehand to explain what the project is and kind of field questions and field, you know, where people are going in that respect. And then, you know, and all of that to happen prior to going before any board. So you know kind of where the public stands and whether you're really going to have opposition or if it's just one or two people who, kind of oppose everything. And so they're going to oppose this too. I would say there has been a lot of opposition in this city for projects that, in my opinion, are for the greater good of our city, that the residents find, or I suppose the residents do not agree with my opinion. And they think that, we're turning into this massive, huge, city, and it's not going to be Gloucester anymore, and we're overdeveloping, and there's all of these complaints about that. But yet on the flip side, we need more housing, and we need this, and we need that. And everyone says we need it, but no one actually votes to approve things that will get us to that goal. So, and I think recently there's been a lot of that. So, I mean, the public is always a concern, I think, depending on the size of the project. But there are ways to kind of be proactive about it and get ahead of it before showing up at a meeting and having, half the city opposing your project. But
Right.
yes, valid question. It would be open for all of the residents of Gloucester to come and either oppose or support, or just be there to, take it all in.
The last time I recall a zoning change, I think this would be similar to when they had to change the area that is the Beauport Hotel right now. That was zoned, I think it might have been zoned marine industrial, and it had to be changed to commercial, I believe. And that took a huge push by the then mayor, Safathia, to make sure that happened. That was, I know that, I know there's a huge push by her for that neighborhood, and took a lot of work even for her.
Well,
So
it sounds,
go ahead, Rob.
it's as we talk about city engagement, it sounds like one of our first places to start then would be, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a similar or different slate, whether it's the mayor or the city council is sitting down with them and presenting to them as to what, really what EDIC is up to, including this, and to see what kind of support we get from the new city council and whoever the mayor is.
Yep. No, 100%. Because without their backing, it's pointless to go anywhere really.
Yeah, because I think what they're talking about with the city master plan is, instead of city council playing sort of more of a I don't want to say passive, but a reactionary role, like they did with the last zoning amendments, is for especially the ward councilors to play a much more proactive engagement role. Because I think, to Patty and Adria's point, is we sort of wait for the reaction from the public and then engage, as opposed to taking a proactive approach by the leadership of the city councils in particular, and taking a proactive approach and be prepared and present the benefits, the upside of what's being done as it relates to the further development of the city.
The relevant ward councilor is Sean Nolan. Is that right?
Yeah.
So just on my list, some of the thoughts I had, one, I thought the Weston and Sampson report was kind of lukewarm about this being a good idea at all, which, you kind of do have to look at it as a prospective business moving here. You're looking at 400,000, that's like 4 market baskets sitting up there, right? I mean, that's a big site. So now you got 250 to 1,000 people at least, right, that need to get up there to work every day. Do we have a safe path for that to even happen? It just, to me, just rolling all this stuff up, it just doesn't seem, it seems like there's a lot more reasons not to try to attempt this than to try. And as an EDIC, or would we really recommend this if we had the ability to pull the trigger? I mean, to me, I probably would not, because I can't imagine the business that would go there and why they would go there. And then what is the impact on that whole community of 1,000 employees coming and going, if that's only one shift, never mind 2 or 3. every day. And then the concerns of the infrastructure in the city. Another option, you said that's 10 acres. The 58 Great Republic is 10 acres. I mean, could we do something over there that just makes a lot more sense for the environment and the neighborhoods and even again, trying to find a prospective tenant. I mean, we would never look at that site and say, yeah, let's bring 1,000 people up there every day. And our trucks in and out and, that to be a good freight lane, in and out of there. So I guess I'd just cut to the chase and say, I would say that's a great idea.
Right. So, I mean, this is great. And I think a question is, and, I'm trying to stay neutral, but I mean, I think.
I have a hard time
More-
saying.
Yeah, no, this is, you're absolutely great. And I mean, the question is how, what should we do? Do we just as a group say, lukewarm doesn't make sense, or do we, reach out, talk to the city? I mean,
Yeah.
and we can be honest, we, sort of say, we not sure we want to do this or promote this, but.
Yeah, I mean, if it was my money and my investment, I wouldn't make it as a developer.
Well, there's two things, is there, in their pro forma, they have this 400,000 square foot building. When you talk to them, they say, there's actually not a space up there, we feel you can put a 400,000
Right.
square foot building. We feel that you could piece in up to 400,000, maybe probably more like 250,000 square feet. So we do need to look at it like that it's actually a smaller project, that it could be several little projects. To me, and as you said, like, who would we move up there? The only thing I could see in the immediate future would be if something in, marine and biotech, or
Right.
if there was someone big on the line that would, had long vision or applied was like, hey, we need to move out of here, and we're like, hey, we have one chance to keep them in here, and that would be this.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't, I see it could be very hard to get all the public funding and all this, and frankly, Tom and I talked about it, at that point, we need an executive director, we need someone to really be pushing this, 40 hours a week uphill, going to all the places, all the meetings, getting people interested. It's not, our group is a volunteer organization. But I think we've brought it this far, you at least need to go to the administration and say, hey, this is what we found. Get reaction like yours or not. If they're like, no, then that's fine. Like, I'm not gonna beat my head against the wall. I got plenty of things to do with my
Right.
time. But at least I think we can't just tuck this away in the file cabinets in the closet of the EDIC and be like, hey, we got all this information. I think it's important to at least let it be, at least bring it out to the shareholders and say, this is what we found, this is what we think, you from a perspective saying, hey, bringing 1,000 people up there, this seems irrational. So that's fine. And then from Patty's perspective, to do all this infrastructure work and not tie in all the sewers, you're just gonna piss off all the residents. So no, I'm 100%, like 100%. I can see both sides of it, but I think we need to at least bring it to the next set of people that deserve
Which
to
is
look at it.
share the
Absolutely.
findings.
Yeah,
And
share
it's-
the findings and kind of the
We're not gonna
pros and
over
cons.
promote or say, EDIC is ready to move on this.
Let's go.
Yeah,
So-
we have no money and we don't have the ability to move it too hard.
Right.
So,
Right.
So if we jump a couple slides to next steps, and it says finalize report, identify unknown landowners,
I'll
review
work on that.
review feasibility assessment with the city, DPW, Community Development Office, mayor.
Did they provide a traffic study within that report of just the estimated number of employees within that
No,
space?
they did not.
Not really.
Because, as Adrian
Right, I
said,
think
that's
it
where
just-
the residents of Gloucester are gonna be like, hell no.
Right, and it really depends on what what it is.
It does,
you
but
know,
so it's a
if
range,
yeah,
but it's, I mean, there's a low and high end of manufacturing people per square foot that,
Right,
I know ours is like 1 per 800 square feet.
Right.
It depends
And
on-
truthfully, we could get some of that information from the work that Cell Signaling has done in Manchester.
Yeah.
I mean, I know their first phase is to bring in 250 employees through a couple, either 1 or 2
Yeah.
lab buildings, and so
Right.
we could work off that from benchmark information to estimate. But that's a great point, because I must admit, I hadn't really thought about the traffic stuff
Yeah,
at all. So,
yeah, any upside to the residents for a sewer would be probably taken away by traffic,
right.
so.
So if we look at this slide that says sort of next steps, which is just outreach, sharing our findings in this report with others, having a discussion with Ed Akerley, beyond the city and beyond the courtesy really of sharing the findings with Senator Tar and Representative Ferrante. Anybody else? Is there other folks that you think we should? I mean, I think we should reach out to Applied. But anybody else that you think? I mean, conceivably, we could frame it as a developer presentation, ask Jay McNiff, ask Applied, there's a few other folks in the city that do sort of development work. What's the group think about sort of outreach as next step? Anybody else that we're sort of missing, or you think, or do you disagree with outreach?
No, I think you've got everyone. I'll talk to Ed. Definitely need to reach out to the city, and then I think Applied just to let them know we're thinking of.
Well, this is Jerry. I have a couple of other thoughts, and I'm sorry I'm coming late to the conversation, but I wonder if we might talk to someone like Applied, if we might also nose around with other potential prospects that of interest in this property. I mean, we are talking about something where we really don't have any known demand for it, right? We'll have to develop it ourselves if it exists. So it's just a bit far afield for me, so I don't really know where they want to explore that, but I would think others in the real estate community, which have certainly spent some today, maybe the chambers floor, just to see if we're barking up a tree or there's anybody living in it.
All right, so I think we'll go forward with the just outreach at this point, but I really appreciate you guys and your thoughts and input and sort of honest assessment, because I certainly know this is not low hanging fruit.
Right.
It's it may be and I think it's interesting, and I didn't even think of it this way, but I also like, so there's 10 acres.
Right.
I mean, not that we would spend it, but if you had $20 million to spend,
Right,
on sort of public infrastructure costs, maybe there's a different direction to go. It's right in front of you. All right. So next things, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Daymark report and the regional electrical system. I forgot to bring my phone in. How are we for time?
It is 5:15.
So Jerry, feel free to weigh in here or clarify or correct me, but I just wanted to bring the group up to speed, so you've heard the presentation about we're at or near capacity and the challenges in the distribution system and the lack of sort of a current adequate transmission or redundancy and resiliency in our system. So the report was finalized. National Grid submitted their plan to this state electric, the Modernization Advisory Council. That was submitted September 1st. That plan includes, it gives some overarching information, but divides their service area into different subregions. We're in the north subregion. And for that subregion, it gives the current state of the distribution system. It identifies 5 and 10-year electric demand forecast based on their information, and then 5 and 10-year planning solutions. And within that, there's, I think, 5 or 6 projects that are identified as basically happening in the next 10 years. These are major substation projects. West Gloucester would have a feed expansion by 2032. Forget exactly the kilovolts, but they are projecting based primarily on electrification. This is EV cars, electrification of heat and cooling systems, that by 2033 will be overloaded on Gloucester or Cape Ann. And so without this additional capacity feeder station by 2032, we're in a real bind. And it's important to note that transmission is not included in conversations with Joe Maraca, the National Grid representative. Transmission for this area is sort of being discussed, and I don't think you could say that it's in the queue, but it is in the planning with ISO New England to happen in the next 20 years. But it's not in this plan. It's not in anything that's happening right now. We had a video call with Daymark on October 5th. Jerry participated. Carl Guston also participated. And so here's a couple of things that came out of that meeting. It was a good call. There's many moving parts. This Modernization Advisory Council continues to meet, actually, I think every other week. There's an open meeting, public meeting, October 30th and November 1st. I certainly plan to try to listen in to one of the days, or if not both days, if I can get a handle on what would be the applicable subjects for us to listen in on. There's also Governor Healy has a new commission on clean energy infrastructure siting and permitting. This would be relevant to the siting of new transmission stuff, right? And again, if we had the redundancy that we sought, you'd have this new line coming down from, sort of the Newburyport area that would go through Ipswich and Essex, and it's no easy task. National Grid is, I know, planning to host stakeholder meetings for these affected subregions in the next month or so as well. In terms of the grid plan, we all agree. Jerry was particularly, it just made the point, and I think everybody generally agreed, is that the forecast in this plan is driven primarily, 95% by the anticipated demand of electrification, electric vehicles, electric heating, cooling for building, etc. The economic development issues, which is what we're responsible, are really not anything that seems to be driving their planning. And according to Kate at Daymark, for our region, it assumes less than 1% growth per year. Some other regions have more aggressive goals, but not a lot. It just doesn't seem that the economic development is a strong consideration. The other issue that we raised is this whole issue of the first mover or the contribution and aid of construction, as a policy that is an impediment to good planning and investment and future scenarios. That is talked about, but not really addressed in the plan. And I certainly, I came away, and Jerry, please weigh in here, where it's sort of in the mix, but it's not clear that there's going to be any traction either driven by the state or National Grid in terms of really looking at changing this policy that would be in line with other states that are much better at really looking at investment for the future and planning accordingly.
Yeah, I would say it's not even in the mix. It isn't going to happen, I think, without a very substantial political effort or regulatory effort, which will be up to us, but I don't think we can do it alone. But I would guess that there are a lot of other regions in the similar boat. A lot of other businesses and EDICs and chambers of commerce and so on who would have a similar interest to ours in this. So I would I think that with effort, we have at least a shot at changing what is now a very kind of anti-economic development state policy.
Hey, Chairman, I mean, are all other states, do they all use the same model of like a first mover paying for construction stuff, or is it unique?
Some do, some don't.
Okay.
And I mean, that's one of the things that I think we could ask Daymark to survey in a more specific way than they have so far. But a reasonable planning process. I mean, the essential problem here is that utilities, as I see it, is that utilities are, and to some extent we want them to be, risk averse. So they take here kind of extremely, but they take the most conservative economically, financially, the most conservative stance that they can in order to not go broke. I mean, if they overestimate the demand and then it doesn't materialize, well, a few of them over the years have literally gone bankrupt. If they underestimate, from their point of view, the worst that happens is that there's a lot of yelling and screaming, but they're still here. So that's what we're up against.
So, I mean, I think we agreed on the Daymark call that the plan, is insufficient based on our understanding of our electric grid system and is inadequate, probably, to meet the electrification needs based on this transitioning economy, let alone, economic development that we would like to see, in Gloucester or this North Shore region.
Yeah, I would be a little more cautious about the electrification needs. They are my own personal view, but it's not based on a lot of research. It's Gloucester specific or Cape Ann specific, is that grid's projections for our area are pretty modest and probably wouldn't meet the state goals, but perhaps what they're projecting elsewhere, say in Boston or in the middle of the state, would offset that so that they would, as an entity, meet the state goals. I don't know the answer to that, and I think one of the things that we should try to get, I think perhaps we could probably ask Daymark for this, is to give I don't think they really, as I heard it, expressed an opinion one way or the other about that. I mean, I think they agreed with me that there's room for doubt, but I don't think they agreed that there was definitely an insufficient response in this region for electrification. So we really need a more careful, at least set of projections about what's likely. And the big sources of electrification demand are electric cars, but that can be managed in a way that most of it's off peak, so it doesn't really affect planning too much. Or at least some of it. And buildings, heating, essentially, the move from natural gas to air source heat pumps. So they propose what seemed to me to be, especially in the short term, slow growth in both of those. Maybe that's appropriate, maybe not. And we need someone on our behalf to dig into the assumptions that National Grid made to reach those conclusions and to test their reasonableness.
One of the interesting charts in there, and I don't remember whether we talked about it or not, but is their projections on sort of seasonality of electrification, and that right around 2034, basically there's going to be, they project a switch, whereas electrification was more in the summer, right, with air conditioning and stuff. And around 2034, as fuel use conceivably declines and dual splits and other heating, cooling that are electric, suddenly the biggest season will be the heating season, rather than the
Yeah,
summer.
that's a biggie, and I think that the grid is basically right about that. It won't be sudden, but we'll all be able to see it coming. But it's going to happen. I don't know when. I don't know if the year they've picked is the right year. But what's going to happen is that the heating load is the electric load for heating is going to increase as the use of air source heat pumps increases. So that ultimately will shift the peak to the winter. And then the issue, and I don't remember anything in the plan about this, and we didn't talk about it, but then what strikes me as a difficult problem is the issue becomes, well, when do you charge your electric vehicles? When you have a summer peak during the day with air conditioning, it's an easy solution is to encourage, with economic incentives, electric vehicle charging to happen at night. Then there's not much strain on the infrastructure. Once both cars and heating are demanding a lot of juice in the winter, and batteries are less efficient in the winter, so there's going to be the electric vehicle demand in the winter will be greater than it is in the summer. Then sort of have a load without a home. How do you manage that? And that's going to become a big problem that I haven't heard much discussion anywhere about, but that's going to have to be addressed in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great point. So in this call, we talked about next steps, and so this is where I'd like to get the group's thoughts about, so we're operating under the assumption that we have money available through ARPA from the city to further our case and obviously the city's case for getting as much as possible to increase capacity, improve the distribution system as soon as possible. So it's certainly enlightened self-interest. So what we talked about is that Daymark would get back to us with a proposal or scope that would generally sort of do the following: a plausible survey of demand needs, including their analysis of the electrification demand in the sub-region, as well as economic development projections. Secondly, and this is, they're not necessarily making the case, but this is information and data to support our belief that National Grid is under planning, both in terms of the need as well as the timeline. And then we could use this information to also sort of argue for policy changes, which are not exactly mutually exclusive. They're two different buckets, but they're certainly related. And then Daymark would conceivably provide ongoing support for the EDIC, on the technical matters. Does that, Jerry, anything that I either missed or you'd like to clarify further based on your remembering the call and sort of discussion of next steps?
Well, yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think you've described what we need from Daymark exactly. What I think they recognize and is true is that they're not all that familiar with the territory in terms of what the economic development potential is. So one of the things that we need to do in some other way, and it would perhaps feed into the analysis they do, is to learn what's out there in terms of people's plans or at least hopes that could turn into serious demands on the electric system. And we have a few folks that we know we need to talk to, like Applied and cell signaling. But I think we need to, and on Tom's slide, he's identified some state agencies that we certainly should check with, but we really need to check with folks who are on the ground, the actual actors. And I'm not sure how to find those folks. Chambers of Commerce might be helpful. Certainly, we should cast our net beyond the city of Gloucester, but also go to the folks in the other cities and towns in this region. They will know perhaps some of the plans that are at least in the thinking stage. And in any event would be important. Any political or regulatory activity that we engage in.
So I think one of the items inherent in that bullet is, what can the EDIC reasonably accomplish? Putting together just that identification, making calls, setting up a meeting, administering a meeting to, these sort of key stakeholders. It's all doable. It's but I think it's beyond. I think either we need to, sort of outsource it to a chamber of commerce that's in a better position to do this, or if there were available money, ARPA monies that we could use, is that we should hire somebody who does some facilitation and event planning and make this happen for us, because it needs to happen really pretty quickly, right? Within the next couple of months. So I don't know what everybody's, either your reaction to next step with Daymark, but also this idea of putting together, a meeting and try to move relatively quickly to build some, both learn, get some information, as Jerry said, but also present us as larger than we are, meaning that we're a group of regional engaged people who want to tell National Grid what we think.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we need to get started, but this is going to be a very long process, including the organizing. So, we might start with a relatively small group of folks we know are interested, but hopefully that will grow as people learn about what we're doing and think that it might be something useful to them. And the regulatory process, regulatory process hasn't even begun really in some ways. There's no DPU docket, for example. So I don't know how much of this is on the radar at our great and general court. I think it's one reason we need to speak with Senator Tarr and Representative Ferrante, but I think what we'll learn from them is that they're working on a lot of different things, and this is not high on their list right now. We need to raise that awareness too. So I think there's a lot to do, but we have a fair amount of time. These are 10 or 15-year projects, so we have a lot of time to get some of it to get it accomplished.
15-year projects with 3-year terms.
But I think, but then we need to get started quickly because there's other things. Aren't there decisions they're making, planning things they're doing now? Isn't that what Daymark decided and determined? There's some planning going on right now.
Correct. The more, I think Jerry's right. Just do it right and start with a small group of folks that would be interested. The local chamber, the chambers of commerce, applied materials, other key and cell signaling, other key energy users, and try to learn what the economic development potential is for this area. And are you willing to put your name attached to something that would go to National Grid or the state?
It would be helpful if we could almost combine the two requests for information that we have, because one is the Weston and Sampson, are there companies here that would use more space if it was available, would use more energy, more employees? And also, so those two things, and kind of surveying applied and having a consistent survey where we're saying, would you use more, less, or even space, more, less, or even energy, people, and just kind of understand, so that we have a collection from Happy Valley, Applied, Cell Signaling, whoever it is. But it would be kind of nice to have a survey from those customers, and even to learn, or those, I call them customers, or those employers here, and even to learn more about when they are seeking employees, where they're coming from, that kind of stuff. So it might be if they could help us with that, we could certainly ask questions and gather the information, or the chamber.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right on. And actually, another thing that I suspect Daymark could help us with is once we're getting a better and better picture of what that economic development potential is, to sell this to the legislature especially, but also a lot of the other stakeholders, governmental and so on, is what's the societal benefit of all this? How many jobs are we talking about? What is the economic result of all that? What is the economic multiplier of those jobs? Those sorts of relatively simple calculations, but we need someone to take them on.
Do the chambers of commerce in the region have some kind of regular regional gathering where they talk about regional issues?
I think they do. I don't remember how frequently is. They're an interesting group because they both collaborate in a significant way and compete for members in a significant way, the North Shore Chamber and the Cape Ann Chamber. And there's some fundamental differences in sort of their membership and audience, but I
would think the electrification issue would be one that they could, it affects them all. That's one that you would think there'd be common ground on.
Yeah,
I would think that, yeah.
We're definitely a key one to go to.
Right. Gretel, going back to you, I think it's an excellent suggestion. Do you think that, and I'm putting a little bit of burden on you, but is there something like, do you have enough experience in surveys to at least just ask them what you would consider? Here's 5 good questions that I would ask. Do you think we need to hire a survey professional? I mean, chambers of commerce do survey or surveys all the time.
Right, well, and even Mass Econ, I mean, I would imagine somebody already has this, that there's a certain list of questions that, as you're considering any type of economic development, you would want to ask your current employment base. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly happy to talk to, I could talk to Weston and Sampson, or they probably have something on Mass Econ as a starting point. And then at least if we are out talking to these various companies, we're all asking the same questions, and then we can compile.
Okay, if I'll get you their contact information, and if you could, I'll reach out to, I know Steve Buckley from the Chamber of Commerce, Cape Ann, is engaged in this issue.
Yeah. So if you could just send me a couple of names and phone numbers, or just make the connections for me, we can at least start that. And if it turns out to be, this isn't a great idea, we won't do it, but maybe we could just get a couple of.
Well, I think like any of these surveys, simple and quick is better than the, 20 question. Yeah. So I think oftentimes it's overthought. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing about saying no to the Weston and Sampson development would be all of a sudden we found out we lost Applied, or we lost some other huge employer because we had nowhere for them to go. That would be terrible. Right. So we have to make sure to support those businesses.
Any other thoughts on next steps, or we're all comfortable with sort of where we think we're going, and at least getting a proposal from Daymark and sort of moving to start to build a constituency consortium, whatever C word you want to use. So last on my list is, last meeting we talked about this sort of successor to Hiltz on Conduit Road, and the board approved me either participating with the city or drafting a comment letter that would essentially express concerns about their activities. So they have submitted an extensive document to the DEP, which is a site suitability application. The city has actively engaged Weston and Sampson to review the traffic study and the stormwater and the technical issues associated with it, and anticipates submitting comments by I believe it's the 17th. So let me just walk you through sort of what I know based on sort of skimming through the site suitability application. So it's 24 Cumberland Road, which is where Hilton has historically been. This is a waste transfer station that would operate 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. There would be some municipal solid waste. I mean, the city of Gloucester is not necessarily sending their waste there, but it's primarily construction and demolition waste, which generally goes out of town to Georgetown. And I think there's one other facility, and there's in Gloucester, I mean, there's 7 or 8 sort of dumpster companies that are sending their waste to, to Georgetown or Southern New Hampshire or wherever it might go. Maximum daily capacity is 350 tons of waste per day. That's roughly an additional 140 vehicle trips per day. So this is either material trucks that would be a dumpster that's bringing waste there. Then it gets put in this large transfer station that would be built. And then ultimately it is moved, shaken, sorted, whatever, and then put into a trailer that would then exit and go to, its final destination.
Was that they came up with that figure, 140 additional?
Correct, that's in their required traffic study. I just noted that they're also requesting variance from various setbacks for the 15,000 square foot facility. So I included a site map, which is indecipherable, especially as a printout. But basically, the main thing is that it's building this 15,000 square foot facility, in addition to the sort of small buildings that currently exist at the site. There's a portion of the application which addresses previously expressed concerns by the city. You don't need to read this whole particular paragraph, but this was the only one I noted where says currently the proposed project is not allowed in the general industrial zoning district, which is what Conduit Road is. The location of a transfer station with solid waste, an increase of over 120 vehicle trips will negatively impact other business development on Conduit Road. And that's generally been our sort of opinion without sort of all the data about how much activity we are talking about. City is engaged, Weston Sampson. Public comment period ends October 17th. So we'll need to get something to the city later this week. So we can either submit our own comment letter or simply incorporate, our concerns, as the city has already done, into the city's letter. I guess Taylor and I have talked about, but I mean, I don't think it is consistent with the concerns that were expressed by the tenants of Conduit Road at the UMass study done years ago. I mean, it's certainly not consistent with how we would like the site to be developed, whether or not, I mean, the entire sort of industrial park, whether or not the expansion goes forward. And certainly the amount of traffic and trucks on Conduit Road and on Magnolia Ave, would be a concern. Does it meet a need for construction demolition waste? I mean, I'm sure it does. But the question is this the right place? And, we need to, as we've also talked about, and Weston Sampson has talked about, we really need to look out for the current existing business universe in Gloucester, which is our bread and butter and has the greatest potential for expansion. Would this harm or hurt it? So anyways, I wanted to share details of the application and make sure that I have a solid sense from the group about whether expressing concern about this expansion is correct based on the group's opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that it's very difficult to see a net public benefit from this. I mean, you mentioned the disposal of construction debris. I guess that's a plus, but you look at all the negatives against that. But I think that's a way at least to. And who is the audience now? Is this the zoning board or what?
This is to the DEP.
The DEP.
And this is a requirement of the state for site suitability. So this is not, truthfully, I don't know that I don't think they've yet applied and gotten variances from the setbacks. I think this is, here's the concept. We first.
So they have to go through the city still? They'd have to go through zoning and planning and.
So I'm not exactly sure where it is in the city planning.
All right, so if it's DEP, then I guess the major argument should be an environmental one. And somebody should at least skim the plan for all the environmental bad things.
Yeah, I mean, but again, it's site suitability, so I think it's an expansive view, and having looked at right, you're right, it's looking at water and wetlands and critical environmental areas of concern and all of that, but it has an extensive traffic study, and certainly talks about, is this an appropriate site for what is, by definition, a dirty business?
Aren't there extensive wetlands in that location?
Yeah, they're across the street. They're across the street and down the road a little bit, but that's the way the water flows.
Yeah.
So arguably, and I assume Weston and Sampson will look at this, is the design stormwater management system adequate to protect the wetlands?
Well, and of course, part of that depends on the development, but just the Weston and Sampson study made a big deal about how you manage water if you do any development there. So wouldn't that become an even larger concern if this happened?
Yeah, this might very well be the first stop, and maybe we don't need to overreact and really beat any drums yet, because there might be a lot of other possible places they could stop, because if they do develop this site, then any city engineer from the city of Gloucester would require them to retain any of their stormwater, and they might not have the ability, because if you look at the uphill slope, it's all ledge and granite, and then that specific building's really far below them, and any water they're going to retain, I don't think they have the space to do it, just because I'm familiar with the site and the situation.
Well, that's certainly a point worth making, isn't it?
Right. I mean, I think I would just ask the city if they want a letter from us, or just to be included in saying that we've, are we a paragraph in their letter, or do they want a letter from us? And I'm assuming there's other stopping points along the way. But I would add, who reached out to us to begin?
Suzanne Egan.
Okay.
Yeah.
The attorney. Yeah, I would just ask her, like, what do we're against it. How much drum beating do you need from us, or chest beating, or whatever you want to call it? And,
yeah,
good. And then we can cite those concerns. Stormwater, traffic. It's not in keeping with our plan for the.
Who's the largest tenant at Conduit?
Well, it used to be ITT Rule, so the largest building up there is Steve Aganis, but now that's broken down to several little businesses. So he's like a 90,000 square foot building. And then after that, it's probably used to be Comdom, now it's XP Power.
So I need to spend more time on Conduit to understand it, but I mean, it's, what are the tenants up there right now?
Well, and there's
That's a big
some
collection
loud
of people.
tenants, there's some tenants that, there's some absolute like wastelands of just broken down stuff that we
Yeah,
can't get rid of.
That I remember.
But it's all up there.
What about in terms of jobs? Are they significant contribution to the economy in that way?
Would this project be?
Yeah, I didn't, again, I sort of skimmed through enough to be able to present the facts and then sort of see if anything coming out. I didn't see anything as to it saying, you know, what it was bringing in terms of jobs to the city. I might have missed it, but I didn't see it. Which would sort of make sense that that's not necessarily DEP's concern. But,
Right. Yeah, this is early on, so maybe that's not part of the study at all yet. I can't imagine there's a lot. You've got probably mostly independent contractors coming in, dumping. You've got a couple of site guys moving stuff around, and then you have their employees hauling it off to another site somewhere. So it can't be.
Yeah. So that and maybe it's a minor argument, but I don't know exactly what DEP's calculus is, but I would imagine that among other things, at least, they must weigh the benefit versus the cost. And one, if there's a lot of environmental cost and not much economic or public benefit, right? That's
Yeah, 100%.
yeah. Any other comments or thoughts? So I'll proceed as, you know, sort of as we discussed, but as I said, we already had a vote on this, so there's no need for a vote going forward. Okay. So Taylor, anything you want to talk about under the financial?
No, we have, and I need to check in, I forget who mentioned it to me, but we have one CD maturing for about 181,000. I think that was someone from, I think it's someone from our auditor or our accountant gave me some guidelines that I wasn't aware of, that we need to be reinvested, but I think we can't go out longer than like 18 months or something. Like we can't lock up money for too long of a period of time. So I just want to check on that before I renew this CD. Other than that, we have about 23,000 in our checking account. We have 30,000 in a money market account that was useful. That's down from about 70,000, but we needed to pay for a lot of these studies we were doing. I don't think we've gotten reimbursed for everything yet, have we? I know we're chasing the 20 and the 20 around.
I believe that has all come in.
It all has come in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I think the only outstanding, we owe a couple $1,000s more to Weston and Sampson once they finalize the report. I believe that,
So we got
Daymark submitted an additional $7,500 bill for the completion of their phase 1 report.
So the state money was the 20 and the 20.
Correct.
And what was the money for the Daymark study?
We paid for
paid
that.
for that, okay.
With the idea that we would be eligible for ARPA funds for the additional work.
Okay. All right. So so that's about it. So we spent a fair amount of money this year, but I think we did some good things with it. Now we need to push that info along.
Any other info, questions, concerns, thoughts? Jerry, I have one for you. What is your travel schedule? I assume you're heading to Germany shortly, or are you not going there this fall, or?
No, we're going Sunday, but I'll be, my cell phone works there, and so I'll be available by phone, text, and Zoom, and email.
Okay. So the meetings are a little hard because it's a little late at night, right? But
yes.
Based on the emails I get from you, you're often working at 10 o'clock at night or so it's not. It can work.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I do a little more carousing there, but yeah, it's manageable.
Okay.
So we'll see. It's a 6 hour time difference.
Okay.
All right. Well, with that then, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion
Seconded.
to adjourn. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Alright.
have a good night, and thanks, everyone.
All
All
right.
right,
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.